welcome back to the Eyes Up Life podcast. I'm Ben Granis. I'm happy you're here, and I'm excited to share with you a special edition episode of the Eyes Up Life podcast. Today we have Ted King. Ted King, professional cyclist, professional dad, professional awesome guy. Those last two were made up, but Ted is an awesome guy, and he is a father and a husband, and so many other things. Ted has had an incredible cycling career. He is just really unbelievable in his fitness, his ability to push himself, his mental capacity, and I have admired his athletic endeavors for quite some time now. He's really involved in getting his fan base and community involved and excited about bikes, and somehow I was able to set up this interview with Ted at his home in Vermont. It was kind of wild. I was in Boston for a conference back in December 2022. I drove up to the Burlington area on Sunday morning after the conference, hung around until Ted was available, and then talked to Ted for an hour and then drove home. It's kind of a long day, but it was really exciting to meet Ted and see all of his bikes, talk about bikes, hang out, meet his wife and kids, and just have a good time. So this is an exciting one for me to share with you all, and hopefully marks the end of my fundraising, which means that I've reached my goal. Congratulations to you all for supporting Eyes Up and TextLess Live More through your financial contributions to fight distracted driving. And that's what Eyes Up is all about. Eyes Up started as a 7,000-mile bike ride around the United States to raise awareness for distracted driving, to promote digital wellness, just to help people live healthier, happier, safer lives by putting the phone down more and more and living Eyes Up in real time. So this is a different episode than what you're used to, which is the Eyes Up Maxis series. Those are still on regularly scheduled programming, but this is an exciting one because it really is someone that I've looked up to since I've started cycling more seriously. And I know anyone who's a bike fan knows who Ted King is, so that's also kind of cool to be sharing a conversation that I had with Ted. And also, there's a video going alongside this. I'm not sure if it's coming out before, after, or during this release, so check that out. Stay tuned to Eyes Up Ride on Instagram. Check it out. And without further ado, Ted King. Enjoy.
I am Ted King. I'm a professional cyclist of some sort or another.
Where are you from?
Born and raised in New Hampshire. As I sit and talk to you now, we're in Vermont, which is my home state.
So walk me through and walk a bunch of people who probably don't know much about you through briefly, if you can, your career and where you're at now.
Yeah, so I grew up playing what I call traditional New England sports, largely a lot of time on snow, a lot of skiing, a lot of hockey, and then went off to college, which right here in Vermont. Went off to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do from that point athletically. I figured I would pursue academics, much like you're presumably meant to do in college. And my brother, who is 3 years my senior, was racing a collegiate national championship just down the road, hosted by University of Vermont. And I was at Middlebury College. I went out and watched a portion of the race and went back to campus and didn't think much of it. My brother went on to win that race, which was one of 3 collegiate national titles that he won. So as I'm at this sort of crossroads of life, I was thinking maybe I should get into cycling. And I did, which resulted in, part of the thinking was I have a lot of hand-me-downs and I probably share some genetic genes that would be to my advantage, seeing that he's having success and I wanted to be successful. So got into cycling here in Vermont. Raced, graduated from college, began bike racing at a professional level straight from there. I say that cycling and professional soccer share a lot of similarities. Like we have a professional league in cycling and in soccer here in the United States, but the big leagues are overseas. So I did 3 years racing domestically and then caught the attention of the right people and got basically recruited to go race overseas and raced for 7 years at the highest level. Raced, I say name a bike race, and I've done it. Giro d'Italia, Tour de France, Paris-Roubaix, so on and so forth. And at the end of the 2015 season, that was 10 years pro, and I said, you know what, I kind of want something different. And so I thought I was stepping away from cycling in a much bigger variety, in a much bigger way than I ended up doing. But that professional road career has sort of segued to ambassadorship and unintentionally a whole lot of gravel riding and racing, which takes place these days.
So could you talk a little bit about what those big races were like overseas? How did you prepare for them? What was the actual racing like, and how did you do?
The big leagues are the big leagues. The Tour de France is the pinnacle, and it feels like a whole different ball game than every other race we've done previously. And we race a lot. In any given year, you're racing probably 50 to 80 race days, and you tally those up, so many, because you might do 10 consecutive days of racing in a particular stage race, or a Grand Tour is 3 straight weeks of racing. So you're racing from January in Tour of San Luis or Tour Down Under, basically seeking warm climates, then back to Europe for freezing cold spring classics. A race like Tour of Flanders, which is probably the biggest one-day race in the world. You race by literally 1 million people on the side of the road. You just feel it. That energy is tangible. So it's all these races that are leading up to, if you're on the roster, the racing Grand Tour, racing the Tour de France. So logistically, I'm on a team of anywhere from 25 to 30 riders, and that means you sign your contract with a team, much like you would any other professional sports team, and you therefore use that team's equipment, that bike, the clothing sponsor, the helmet sponsor, so on and so forth. And then it's that team's job to pick presumably the best 8, at this point 9, they've changed it down to 8 now, riders for the particular race, be it a Grand Tour, be it a one-day classic, so on and so forth. So it's lining up at the Tour de France, for example. It's something that I've at that point put not my entire life behind, but the previous decade or more leading into that race. When I say not my entire life, because getting into cycling in college was relatively late. But it's wild, man. It's loud, it's fun, it's crazy, it's hectic. It is super hectic. I actually didn't finish the 2 Tours de France that I raced because I succumbed to too many crashes, a couple of too many broken bones, which is heartbreaking. But I don't know. Not everybody who races professionally even makes it to the Tour, so I get to apparently hang my hat on that.
What's when you were training in professional road cycling, what was a normal day? Or maybe a week makes more sense.
Yeah. When you are a professional cyclist, every moment of every day, for all intents and purposes, revolves around performance. In general, I don't sleep in, but you're trying to gain as much sleep as possible, because sleep is one of the best performance enhancing things you can do. Wake up, breakfast, do some stretching, do some yoga, do some core strength. For sure, you already know what your training is going to look like based on a training program that you correspond with either team or your individual coach about. So it might be an easy hour and a half spin, or maybe you have a 5 or 6 hour long endurance ride. That could be peppered with intervals of all kind, or it could just be do a 6 hour endurance ride. Hopefully, presumably, not always, not hopefully. It doesn't hurt to have buddies who you're training with. I was living in Girona for most of my career, which is a cool cycling town north of Barcelona in Spain. And, you pick a place by having good weather, probably an airport nearby, and some sort of social outlet. And, a town like Girona definitely has all those things. So you've hooked up with your buddies. You say you're going to go out for this ride. You maybe do the whole ride together, maybe do a portion of it together. Come back home. Immediately, the next best performance enhancing thing is replenish your glycogen stores, or at least that's what every sports nutritionist will tell you. So, have some sort of lunch, rest. I wasn't much of a napper, but rest, lay low. You're also living independently while training, as opposed to being at races where the team caters to you. So, do some chores, do some grocery shopping, whatever you need to do, and then have dinner, rest, repeat. Like it's fun, especially in hindsight, just because life was so simple. Uh, and it's also, I mean, I guess at the moment it's pretty crude and pretty not crude. It's pretty rudimentary. It's simple. Eat, sleep, ride.
What was from that part of your career? What was your proudest moment?
Oh gosh, I think because I got into cycling late, I never had any aspirations from the very beginning. I need to make it to Europe. I need to race a Grand Tour. I need to do anything. I mean, when I was a senior in college, and my friends were applying to jobs, I was literally applying to professional cycling teams, and even having that first contract was unexpected. So, and then I had success in America, and I was the number one ranked rider, and that's what brought me to Europe. It was always these doors perpetually opening. And then, you come to a crossroads and you come to this open door and say, yeah, I guess this is kind of a risk, but I want to take it. So the punchline being, I never expected to race the Tour de France. To answer the question, what was I most proud of? I think it was probably lining up at the Tour. It's a culmination of so much hard work and dedication. Like I said, not everybody's there's no guarantees you're going to make it there. And it's all of a sudden all eyes are on you in the cycling world and beyond. It's like it just validated everything I'd done for the previous decade and a half.
And so, what year did you retire, and what's been the transition to where you are now like?
Yeah, when I say a decade and a half, that was incorrect and way off. I retired. I decided after 10 years that at the age of 32, I'd experienced everything I wanted to do. I'd traveled the world. I'd done the world's biggest races. I'd raced for Peter Sagan for 4 straight years, and he was the winningest rider on the planet. And I was basically doing every race that he did. So that was my penultimate year. It was my last year with Peter, and then I'm sort of on a young upstart squad that was seeking much more. I was seeking improvement, and so basically we're not on the podium very often. And it's like, what is my next goal as a domestique? You don't seek the acclaim. It's almost like being a lineman on a football team. It's like you do the hard work, and then your hero goes and wins the race, and then we slowly trot on and finish the race a few minutes later. So at the age of 32, I said, okay, I love cycling. I've seen a lot of my colleagues from professional cycling step away from the sport and hate it because they didn't get a contract. They ended their career injured. They didn't get a contract for that reason. And I still loved riding a bike, and I didn't want to lose that. And so beginning with Cannondale, they had said sometime in the previous 2 or 3 years of my career, they said, when you want to step away from cycling, we'll be there to support you. And I had no idea what that meant. I mean, in my mind, that meant if I'm going to open a bike shop, they would help sell bikes. And so I thought, okay, I don't really want to open a bike shop. That's very kind. Thank you, Cannondale. But then come to the crossroads of retiring, the proposition presented itself to become an ambassador for cycling. And at that point, gravel really wasn't a sport, which is now it's the most booming aspect of what's happening in cycling. So it was to work with R&D. It was to do a lot of social projects. It's to go to product launches. It's go to store openings. It's create rides. It's create DIY gravel. It's do crazy stuff on New Year's Eve. It's on the bike. Do crazy stuff on New Year's Eve. Just get wild. Perpetuate the stoke of riding the bike, because I think what worked to my advantage all through my career very unintentionally was I was very transparent about what professional cycling was through social media. And so then when it came time to retire, so to speak, from the world tour, these sponsors, beginning with Cannondale and then a whole handful more, said, hey, let's support you and see where this goes. And that's what Career 2.0 has been.
So how has it been? It's probably a much more relaxed life. No?
No, I shouldn't shake my head. Finish your question.
No, yeah. Well, I guess it's probably busy in a different way. Your life is still heavy revolving around training, but it's not, right. I imagine it's not 24/7. So what is it?
That refrigerator is full of beer. In a previous lifetime, I would swear off beer for 6 months a year. And I mean, it's just because you're a robot. When you're racing the world tour, like I said, you eat, sleep, ride, eat, sleep, race. I joke that life is much more hectic now because I need to be a serial entrepreneur. I'm with each contract, with each sponsor. I want to outwork myself as much as I want to outwork my fellow privateers, so that those sponsors are very happy with me at the end of the year when it comes contract time. As any kind of entrepreneur, the work is never done. So, also now with two little kids at home, that makes things quite a bit more exciting. So it's wake up early. It's get an hour of work done at 5 a.m. before the kids get up, and then it's take care of the kids. And then now I call training catch as catch can. It's like if I see that the weather's good and I have an hour, then I'll go take advantage of that. If the weather's crappy and I have an hour, I'll ride the trainer. If the weather's good and I've got 3 hours, then I'll go ride for 3 hours. With the balance of everything else I need to do. Like I said, sponsor obligations. I do a bit of coaching on the side. I co-own a sports nutrition company called Untapped. I do a whole handful of other things that are just impossible while you are purely laser focused racing the World Tour. So it's a mix of busier and less busy.
What's one thing that stands out to you that kept you going when you were racing the World Tour and training for it, and what's one thing now that keeps you motivated to do the millions of things that you have going on at once?
When you are a professional cyclist, racing on a World Tour team is self-motivating and self-perpetuating. It's like you want to do better. You want to train better, you want to be faster, you want to have a better result. I mean, basically, because the whole sport revolves around suffering, you want to suffer less long. If you are the one instigating the suffering, if you're at the front of the race, if you're kicking butt, like that means you are doing well and making other people suffer more. So, the self-perpetuation is what got me up and out the door every day. Being able to race and ride a bike at the highest level is it's such a cool place to be. And again, having never anticipated it or expected it, it worked really well as a place I wanted to be. Fast forward to the present, and it's this crazy everyday hustle. And I think it's having a family and wanting to be a provider is a huge point of purpose in every day. And so whether that is training, whether that is traveling to an event, whether that is selling Untapped, whether that is coaching, whether that is staying up late and waking up early in order to fit it all in, it's showing my kids hard work and then being able to provide for my family.
What was the biggest setback for you during your career, and how'd you get through it?
Injuries are, I would say, inevitable. Crashes are inevitable. The number you take and how hard they that's what's varied, and I took some really hard crashes. I think probably the biggest setback was literally not finishing the tour. Stage 1 of the tour, 2013, we're working for Saga, and it's a sprint stage. We can very likely end up in the yellow jersey that stage. And probably with 10K to go, there's a pile up, and I get caught straight in it. And that resulted in a broken scapula, which we didn't discover for another week because I soldiered through for another 3 days. Then it was time cut on stage 3. Stage 4? Stage 3. If you look up the hashtag #LetTedRide, that'll explain some of it. The UCI ASO unceremoniously asked, they say the word unceremoniously. It was very ceremonious the way they asked me not to race the next day. That's where the sport of cycling has so many sort of funny unwritten rules, and you can nudge a person in who's past the time cut. Anyway, I didn't finish time cut on a particularly difficult team time trial, which as a result, I wasn't able to finish racing. That was the biggest setback. How did I rebound from that? It was the next day. I was walking around France. My parents had just arrived to the race. Let me backtrack. My dad had a stroke. He had a brain injury in 2003. And as a result, it was very difficult for them to travel 2 races. Like, that was the first race they ever went to Europe to watch me participate in. And so I'm trying to lick my wounds. I'm trying to not feel bad for myself as my parents have made this trip. And then I pick up the newspaper. It was the International Herald Tribune, which is, good international newspaper, and it was just like the whole front page was covered in war and strife and famine and all these terrible things. And there I am being like, oh my gosh, I can't race the Tour de France. I think that put it all in perspective real darn quick.
So you are a sponsored athlete, a professional athlete. There's naturally in the world that we live in a lot of publicity that comes from social media and the internet. Talk to me about your experience with it, because you've been part of this athlete pool from before it was really a thing to now where it's everything. So what's been that like? What's that been like?
I call myself, without trying to put a feather in my cap, I was an early adopter to a lot of social media. I was on Twitter in 2009. I was on Facebook when Facebook was meant as a social manual Facebook to know that girl in your Spanish class, which was introduced to a lot of small liberal arts schools in college. I mean, I think I was probably in the first, 10,000 users of Facebook. Strava, same story. That was started down the road. I mean, Strava, for all intents and purposes, is a social media platform. I was really early with them. Instagram, same story. I don't do TikTok. I don't do some of the others. My sister-in-law.
Not yet, anyways.
My sister-in-law works for Snapchat. I should take that back. I have a TikTok account. I've never opened it beyond creating the account. Someone told me it's important. Where my point is, I think in especially using these social media platforms over an arc of time, you see the good, which certainly goes in tandem with the bad. There are some that are incredibly positive. I think Strava is an incredibly positive social media platform. People are there who are largely stoked on your bike ride or ask curious, insightful questions on training or nutrition or routes or what have you. I think Instagram is an advertising platform, and I think if you hear why any of these things were created, they're all meant for advertising.
What's like your day-to-day like consumption versus content creation?
I like to say that I'm a producer, not a consumer, which is not 100% accurate. I mean, yes, you will find me scrolling through social media as much as the next person. I shouldn't say as much as the next person because I really, really try hard to cap it at a couple seconds or a couple minutes. Yeah, I mean, as a result of working with the companies with whom I work, part of the job is to put things on social media, and so that part is the production part, and it's in general producing the idea that bike riding is really fun. And so, as much as you say that social media is life through rose-colored glasses, I mean that is a big portion of it. I put my injuries on there, so it's not all sunshine and cinnamon. It's a big mix of what's good, what's bad, and everything in between.
What's some advice you would offer to people, particularly young people advice for a young person or anyone generally, but particularly young people who are caught up in more of the consumption side of things? Because most people, they're producing, but they're not producing for as like a contract.
Part of their job.
Yeah, right, exactly. So someone who's more caught up in the scrolling and they spend hours a day dealing with the vortex.
Man, I mean, I think study after study goes to show the negative effects of social media, the depression that results, the online bullying, the politicization, and the mindlessness that is the politics of social media. I mean, I think it is as simple as deleting the app, and I think that's powerful, and I think that makes a great statement. And I've never seen you see a lot of people post, hey, I've just taken a month-long or week-long or year-long reprieve from social media, which I'm laughing because it's funny because then they get back on. But presumably they've learned something in that time, and they always come back saying it was a positive experience. So, I think an unending pause to social media could be a very good thing. I mean, to see the world around you is invaluable. I really try hard to not be using my phone and not be using technology with two little kids upstairs. I mean, they consume everything we do. It's funny, our daughter walks around with anything as if it's a phone in her ear, which is hilarious because who talks with their phone? I don't talk anymore on my phone. Like, I feel like we live in such a world of text. So when she first did that, I'm like, how do you even know what that is? Which goes to show, I mean, A, I'm far from perfect, and B, kids, they just absorb your traits and movements and actions, and yeah, it's like looking into a very strong self-reflective mirror. I don't know. Social media is far from the be-all, end-all. It is a portion of what I do. I like nothing more in terms of perpetuating the happiness of bike riding than being on a group ride, hosting group rides, doing things face-to-face. And that is something that I would make me very happy if social media went away.
It seems like it's unrealistic that it will go away at least soon. You're someone who is fortunate enough to know and appreciate how good being outside is. Mm-hmm. And I am also a believer in getting outside for health and mental health, health generally. What's a step that we can all take to spend more time doing something that we love or getting outside?
I mean, it is difficult. You need to make the conscious decision to say, I'm going to put my phone down and go outside. I mean, the endorphins that I seek and receive from riding a bike far exceed what I'm going to tweet or get in a death scroll. So I realize that is a lot easier said than done. If it is pouring rain and it is 37 degrees, I'm still probably more inclined to get on my bike than go scroll social media. And that's because it is part of my it's probably part of my DNA at this point. But it still is it's a decision, and it's something that gives me happiness. I think the world would be a better place if more people got outside, sought those endorphins, turned away from the screen, were aware of pedestrian and two-wheeled traffic, and just literally make the world a better place.
As a parent, a fairly recent parent, how does your understanding of the effects of phones and social media impact your parenting?
Great question. Yeah, my wife and I made a very conscientious decision to limit technology in a really big way to our kids, which, let me think. We allow we allow screen time when it comes to FaceTime with family. So, talking to grandparents, talking to family members. And what I actually think is really cool about phones is you have thousands or tens of thousands of photos in there. And so my daughter might be 2.5, but she has scrolled back through so many photos of her life. And so when she is now 2.5, looking at a photo of the time that she was 4 months old visiting her grandparents in Seattle, she talks about it, and she talks in detail about that visit. And does she actually have the memory, or is it the social the construct of that photo and us echoing the story? I think that's really cool. I mean, who knows which one it is, but there's so many pieces of that she loves and remembers and talks about. So we do allow her to look through images and videos. Travel time, I would be a fool if I didn't say that we give our kids limited time on an iPad when we're on an airplane. And that is thankfully about it. Kids there's something mesmerizing about a neon screen. I mean, like our 6-month-old, we don't have a TV in the house, and so if there's a screen on our hands, like, he's looking at it.
You don't have a single TV in your house?
That's a lie. We have a TV, but I bet it hasn't been on in 8 months.
You effectively don't have a TV.
For all intents and purposes.
Some people have their TV on all day.
Correct.
So you're obviously a cyclist. Talk to me about your experience with distracted drivers and just road use as a driver and a cyclist.
Yeah, there are a few things that make me angrier than when a vehicle goes by in either direction and I see that the person is on the phone, because basically I feel like I'm lucky in that instance. Um, I'm at a point on my bicycle that I have a rear Garmin radar, so that warns me on my cycling computer in front of me. There is a radar out back that tells me when a car is coming, so I'm hyper aware. I mean, I have good hearing and I can generally hear it, and so I'll pay even more attention to be as far right as possible. But I'm very aware of that. I have a bike that has a mirror on it for the same reason. 5 years ago, I wouldn't be caught dead with either of those things. And no, I didn't mean to use that term, but I feel naked if I don't have them now. I enjoy driving in particular. I mean, I enjoy riding my bike in particularly sinuous roads or roads that have little to no cell reception, because then I know that the person is probably not on the phone. Yeah, it is an inevitable danger. A bike has the same rights to the road as a car, as a truck. Roads were originally designed for bicycles. The bicycle has been around longer than cars, so go figure. When you're getting yelled at, you don't belong on this road. Well, actually, we do. And yes, we do pay our taxes, and that's a moot point anyway. Yeah, we live in a very addicted to technology age, and it's scary. A big reason we have moved to Vermont is we love riding our bikes, and we are away from the crazy scrum of traffic that we experienced when we were living in California. I don't know.
Have you had any close calls with cars?
Not really. I mean, yes. I feel like more often than not, if a car is going to buzz you, they're doing that intentionally. Because it's often when the mirror is this far away from you and the horn is blaring. But take that for what it is. No, I mean, I see and hear horror stories all the time. I follow someone called Cyclist lawyer on Instagram, and she does a terrific job protecting and helping folks who have been, involved in vehicular accidents. And it's too often. One is too many. So,
Do you know anyone, do you have any close friends or anyone who's been hit or affected by a car or distracted driving that you know of?
thank God, no. No.
That's pretty impressive and
I know.
surprising.
I assume. I mean, the answer is probably yes, but there's no one that I can be like, right. That person in this instance.
Yeah.
No, I feel like when I have heard of it or seen it, it's social media or the news, where some teen is making some poor decision and then gets off with a slap on the wrist.
I drove by someone today on my way here who had I don't know if it was a map or something, but a large document fully on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And on the phone.
Nice.
On the highway.
Maybe they were doing their crossword puzzle. And they were calling up their friend, asking the clue. I mean, we just, as a humanity, as a species, in a modern age, we are trying to do more. I listened to a sermon at church yesterday where they talked about, I think the year was in the 1960s, there was a study that said, based on technological advances, in the year 1985, we will be working 22-hour work weeks, and I think they said work 4 days a week. Point being, because of technology being so helpful, we're going to be that much more productive and then therefore have all this free time. But as a result of especially social media and technology in general, we occupy that time with time on our phones, or time death scrolling, or time that's basically just wasted. So maybe we do literally work a 22-hour week when you really boil it down. But the point being, we want to always be doing something. We want to, it's rare you just get to sit back and relax. It's rare so the challenge was, get in the longest line at the grocery store, drive the speed limit, do something where you don't feel perpetually rushed. those things which sound so basic are really big challenges. Like, to drive the speed limit, gosh, that's easier said than done. I mean, I'm no different. I've got a lot to do. I feel like every day my to-do list starts this long and ends up this long, and start the next day and try to chip away at it, and it just gets longer. So I get it. I'm far from invincible or immune to it.
What's your approach to distractions in the car?
Um, I like that the new iPhones come with the app that say, "Hey, I'm driving." I mean, turning that on is really nice.
So have you been using that?
I in Yeah, I don't know how often. Probably more often than not. When we had kids, we know that those kids are watching. So just it takes the conscientious decision, but say I don't want to do that. I don't. Having a dashboard mount helps, so that the only thing I really need to do is look at a map. Pulling over on the side of the road is something that will enhance your rush ultimately, but is a safer alternative, and I do that a whole handful of times. I mean, much like making the conscientious decision to go outside instead of getting on your phone, it's the same kind of decision. It is a decision that goes on up here, goes on here. I mean, it's on your heart. You know that it's super gosh darn important not to be on your phone.
What would you say to someone who, to try to get through to them, someone who, like that woman I described, fully distracted, someone who just does not get, maybe doesn't appreciate what it's like to be another user of the road, or just hasn't had a close call or knows someone affected?
Man, I wouldn't even. I don't know. I mean, there were a handful of commercials not too long ago where they show just how they were impactful. In an instant, how quickly an accident can happen with distraction. I think it's a woman who's on her phone, not to be judging women, maybe it was a guy on her phone. There's a kid in the back seat, kid's crying, looks down at the phone, next thing they know, they show a slow motion crash, which looks, it's catastrophic. As strange as a commercial sounds, so sort of glancing and superficial, seeing something like that can be, and hopefully has been, impactful. I don't know what I would say to somebody who is doing a crossword puzzle while they're on the phone. I feel like these are the arguments that as cyclists are next to impossible to win. And not to be defeatist, but it's like any argument you'll get in while you're on a bike and a car goes by laying on the horn. If that car lays on their horn and there's a stop sign or four-way intersection and a traffic light 100 yards ahead and we stop together, like, if you're going to have a conversation, 99% of the time it's going to end up in yelling. Maybe 1% of the time you can have a conversation that doesn't begin with flicking the person off. It is, look, I am a human being. I have the same right to be here. Chill the F out. I mean, my temperature rises too when these things happen. So,
I mean, how does it feel? Because you've ridden all over the world in so many other countries, particularly in Northern Europe. It seems there is so much respect and accommodations with infrastructure and by motorists for cyclists, and then here it seems. I mean, there's certainly a lot of progress being made in a handful of cities, but by and large, there aren't.
yeah, I mean, I think you're right. In Europe, cycling is more well received, more well respected, more understood, more part of general infrastructure. Like, if you live a half mile from the nearest grocery store, chances are you're not going to get in a car to go down there. Like, bikes are part of the infrastructure. We live in a, especially modern society, very distant land. And as a result, cars are mandatory. I mean, you're not going to ride your bike 20 miles to go to the grocery store to get a gallon of milk. We live more distant from downtowns than a lot of places. Changing that and changing the whole ideology of an American person living in this society is, I again, I don't want to sound defeated, but I don't know how to even begin to have that conversation. I think so. Instead of trying to have that conversation, I would prefer to lead with my actions. Gravel cycling is the most gravitating side of cycling that we've ever seen. It's better than criteriums and grand fondos and road racing and mountain bike racing and cyclocross racing. It is putting people on bikes, so many more people on bikes that would never be on a bike otherwise. And it's that understanding. It's seeing how dangerous roads are. It's maybe Uncle Joe has just gotten into gravel riding, and niece Sarah all of a sudden has an appreciation for cyclists in general because she's looking up to Uncle Joe. You know, it's that is the most minuscule drop in the bucket that I can do, but I feel like that is more impactful than trying to bark at people on social media, which I see a lot of people doing. License plate 419783. That person buzzed me at the light today. It's like, that sucks. I'm sorry. I don't know how that is going to help anything.
Right. It's just as productive as the driver yelling at the cyclist. It's,
right.
What's it going to do?
Yeah, 2 middle fingers in the air.
Right. Right. Doesn't add up to a positive. So I've talked to a lot of people who have either fully or partially moved away from road riding because of the roads feeling unsafe or knowing someone who was killed on the road. What keeps you riding on the road? Because I know you don't ride entirely on gravel.
Correct. No, I mean, the majority of my miles are done on the road. I am a very firm believer in riding to the furthest right as possible. It blows me away how many cyclists weave in and out and ride closer to the yellow line than the white line. Like, good bike etiquette will serve you very well. Especially especially riding in groups. I mean, yeah, strength in numbers and you have a bigger mass on the road, but cyclists drive me crazy in equal numbers as motorists.
So any tips that you would offer to
just ride to the friggin' right. Like, I don't know why people don't ride to the right. It's crazy. It drives me bonkers. Certainly not every road has shoulders. Where you are in Connecticut, shoulders they're unheard of.
Not even part of the conversation.
Exactly. Like, what is that? Being a conscientious, positive, smart citizen of the road will help out tremendously. And by that I mean ride to the right. Use hand signals to point out so that motorists know what you are going to do. Follow the rules of the road. Don't blaze through stop signs. Don't blaze through red lights. Communicating, saying thank you. I think that goes tremendously far. There are so many times you will approach a four-way intersection. You get there after other cars. The cars sort of assume you're going to blow the intersection, so they wave you through. I say, no, I'm going to wave you through because you were there first. This is your spot, and I'm an equal citizen of this of this road. I think that behavior goes far. The technology and just pieces of equipment to your advantage. Like I said, that Garmin radar I think is really helpful. Mirrors are helpful. Lights are helpful. I mean, it's amazing how powerful these strobe lights are.
Yeah, just be visible.
Be visible.
And respectful.
Yeah, visible, respectful. It doesn't hurt that a lot of these new pieces of equipment have cameras in them. So yeah, unfortunately, the benefit of a camera is typically in the aftermath. But if every vehicle knew that every bicycle had a camera on it, cars would act one heck of a lot differently.
What's some advice you would offer to a young person hoping to follow their dream, but pressures from their surrounding environment, people at school, parents, etc., are pushing them in the opposite? Not necessarily becoming a pro cyclist, but something that's counter to what they're being told they should do.
What are they being told they're supposed to do?
Just something like, say their teachers are telling them to get a job in finance because they're good at math, but they want to become a photographer or something.
Well, My dad was a very successful orthopedic surgeon, and he worked really, really hard. And he worked 25 years without taking a sick day. And then he suffered a stroke at the age of 57, which has nothing to do with being a stressed out job. He was a wonderful father and a very relaxed human being and very fit, ran 4 or 5 days a week. But watching how quickly a rug was pulled out from under him when that happened to him, that opened up doors in my mind of places that I could go on a bike. I studied economics, and probably a future in finance was what the script was being told for me, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So, in combination of seeing what happened to my dad and living in the age in which we lived, it allowed me to say, I want to ride a bike. I want to race a bike. I mean, I had set a foundation so that it was potentially a viable future. If I went 5 years down the road and I was still making no money, I would probably go back to that finance background, or have some other backup plan. But I think you see the overall point. Follow your dream, because you never know where life is going to take you. It doesn't hurt to do your homework beforehand and figure out some of the steps that are going to allow you success. It doesn't hurt to have a backup plan, to have a parachute option. But goodness gracious, as I turn 40 in a month and a half, I'll tell you, life goes quick.
Closing thoughts, Ted. Reflections, thoughts, comments.
I hope the furnace doesn't turn on in the next few seconds.
It might.
Ride your bike. Riding your bike is better for you. It's better for society. It lowers stress. It reduces traffic. If everybody woke up and did 15 minutes of exercise or 30 minutes of exercise, you could touch your toes or you could get on a bike. That sense of freedom is immeasurable. I like going for a jog, but what I really like about bike riding is in 5 minutes, I can cover the same distance that I covered over the course of my jog. The bike is a tool. I mean, there's a reason that kids of any age get on a bike, and once they learn, their world is freedom. And that is something that I think adults forget. I think people forget through their teens or in their early 20s and then into adulthood. Gravel cycling is a great avenue right now for people any of all ages, whether you're new to cycling entirely. So I'm not, as much as I'm saying, folks, you should get into cycling, like any sort of avenue that has those athletic endorphins are so much better for the world at large. So,
and way more powerful than the ones you get from using your phone.
By a factor of 1 million. Yeah. Your future staring at social media is a downward trajectory. The future of getting into any kind of athletic pursuit is nothing but up.
I like that. Boom. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to that conversation I had with Ted King back in December 2022. Ted, having biked so many miles in his life, has a mature perspective on distracted driving and social media and all of those things that we are talking about here on the Eyes Up Life podcast. I believe that his perspective is helpful for a lot of people, and I hope that it was helpful for you to hear his thoughts. Also to hear a little bit more about his career from the perspective of someone who is familiar with professional cycling, but not as super devoted as a fan as some other cycling people are, which is me. I don't follow professional cycling avidly, but I do know who some of the pro cyclists are. So that's kind of where I was coming from with this conversation, to get a little bit of a more average Joe perspective on what his career is. Thank you for listening to Ted and I talk. Thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the Eyes Up Life podcast. And stay tuned for regularly scheduled Maxxis Tires episodes coming out regularly through October 2023. We'll look forward to having you back here listening in. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.